Everybody, welcome to UGA Sports. My name is Rodney DeBolsey. I'm joined by Trent Smallwood, one of our longest tenured recruiting writers at UGA Sports, and I appreciate Trent jumping on with me. We appreciate all of you joining us. Let us know where you're watching from in the comment section there. So we got Brooks, we got Michael Turner, we got Kirby Donnelly. Is that your real name? Another Kirby? Maybe it's the real Kirby. Michael Plunkett's in here. Randall Hammond, Trenton, D Brown. Appreciate D Brown. Appreciate everybody jumping in. Sawyer. We're moments away from finding out where the hell Elijah Griffin's going to go. We don't do these all the time, especially for kids that are either like a sophomore or a junior. We saw some bad news with Jared Curtis decommitting the other day. But if it's a big enough name that we jump on, we try to do a live reaction, let you know when it goes down. So we've got other folks kind of watching to see when it actually happens. Our recruiting writers are all, except for Trent, who actually has a real job, unlike the rest of us, they're all getting ready to head to Texas to cover the Georgia versus Texas game for us. So we can talk about that too if you guys like, but we're just trying to keep up with, keep all the balls in the air, and we'll keep an eye on when Elijah Griffin is going to announce his commitment. Okay, set the stage for us. What are the final schools there, Trent?
You got Georgia, USC, and Miami. So you got Georgia, NIL, and NIL.
That's not what I've been told for like 6 months. So I wanted to hear it from you because I just don't believe it.
Well, Georgia's kind of been the long-standing guy, the team in his top three. I think the top three overall switched up, multiple times, but I think Georgia has been kind of your team that's always in the mix of that three. So you got to feel pretty good about where the Dogs, stand going into this announcement.
I like where they stand. I predicted them live on our recruiting. If you're not a member of UJ Sports, and you may not have seen it, but on our recruiting show that we have, we keep it behind the paywall. We now have it behind the paywall at your YouTube channel. To answer Junkyard, live on air, I predicted that he's going to Georgia, and I put in my future cast prediction. But you did one months ago. How long ago did you predict he was going to Georgia? I know he was in your early. You do a future, not a future cast, but a class prediction.
Yeah, he was in it from the start. I think I predicted him to Georgia like 6 years ago.
And this is not, Trent doesn't do this. He doesn't just predict everybody's going. And he pisses off a lot of people, and he goes, yeah, this kid's not coming here. This kid's not coming here. This kid's not coming here. This one is. He's the best in the business of doing it. Everyone tries to mimic it. But, man, you called this one. Ben Bachman did too, I think, back in
I don't even remember when I put in a future cast. I'd have to look back, but
hey,
a lot of people get irritated at the class pitch because they're looking at other sites, especially with the Chroma one. I put one in for Chroma back in July or something
last year.
Yeah. That was
November 15th, 2023.
Yeah, I put one in for Chroma, a few months ago, and it seemed to be trending away, and it's just not what what we were hearing with the relationship with Josh Crawford, and then things started trending back this way. But I called a lot of hate mail for that one, during the late stages of August or late stages of July and August. But hey, so I'm not doing it for likes.
Let the dominoes start to fall. I like that.
But yeah, this is a big domino, especially for Kirby Smart and the direction of this program. You've kind of seen him kind of want to base his teams off the line of scrimmage, and over the past couple of years, it hasn't really been up to standard of what Georgia wants to be. And I think this is definitely a move in the right direction. Isaiah Gibson. If Georgia can, land Elijah Griffin today, and then if they can land Justice Terry, those are three guys that are impact guys, maybe from the jump. So,
and what do they not have this year?
Yeah, they don't have and they don't have linemen that can get after the passer. You've seen Ingram Dawkins do it, and you've seen some guys do it, but I'm talking about on a consistent, like you saw it Clemson a few years ago with their guys, and like you've seen the Alabama in the past, and just guys that can get after the passer, and not having to bring that extra guy like Georgia's been forced to do time and time again this year. Getting after that passer before, collapse in the pocket, and that's really what they've been missing. And Georgia has an opportunity here to kind of rebuild that foundation, and it starts the line of scrimmage, and this would be a big get, adding him with already having Isaiah Gibson, and with Justice Terry still on the map with Georgia kind of trending there. So
I like there's a good question there. What does this mean for Justice Terry? You're bringing in the number 2 defensive tackle in the nation, the number 9 player overall. Justice Terry is the number 1 defensive tackle in the nation. What do we have him, like number 2 overall? I mean, he's crazily up there. In other words, so this is
8 or 9 overall.
If you get Elijah, which again, we predicted him to come to the Dogs. We're not trying to hide the ball here or anything and keep it from anybody. But hey, we've also been here. What was it, KJ Bolden? We were sitting there expecting to pick Georgia. You put on the FSU hat. It was somebody, and we're like, "What the hell just happened?"
Yeah, you've had KJ Bolden, you've had CJ Wiley, you've had several come through that you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, so we're predicting, but what does this mean for Justice Terry? Because you're like, well, if you've got a 5-star defensive tackle, you got the number 2 guy. Can you legitimately get both?
Yeah, I don't think it really impacts Justice Terry because I think the two have talked. I think Georgia's long been trying to get these two, trying to pair these two up. And these are two that, yes, they're listed as defensive tackle, but they're not necessarily going to play the same position when they get in Georgia's scheme. So you can line one up as a 5 and one up as a 3, or you can line, your nickel packages. You can line them both up on the inside and be your nickel package with the Isaiah Gibson and another rusher on the outside. You can do multiple things. So I don't think it really impacts Justice Terry's final decision. I think this has been something in the works for a while. I think the two definitely talk. They've been on several recruiting visits together, and they've talked. So I don't think they impact each other, but boy, I know Kirby Smart would love to have both of them on the interior of that line.
I got a lot of questions. Are y'all going to stream it? We know we're not there. All of our guys are actually at the airport flying to Texas. So we're watching to see when it goes hit, but we're trying to give you a context of what this means for Georgia if he does as assumed and picks the Dogs. So not trying to spoil this moment either by saying he's already done it. And again, in years past, I mean, it'd be easy to have a whole bunch of stuff ready and be like, yeah, pick Georgia, launch, publish, go. And shit, I did that with Caleb Downs. That bit me in the ass. I made one promise in 31 years of covering Georgia football, and I've never ever promised. I won't even promise that the team will show up. We got killed. But to your point about Justice Terry, I've spoken to the kid numerous times, and when I remember asking him after, about this specifically, what about you and Elijah Griffin? He's like, yeah, well, I know him. He's good. We'd be great. We could both play for Georgia. When he was committed, he was pushing for him. When Justice Terry was committed to Georgia, he was pushing for Elijah Griffin. When he decommitted, he's like, well, everybody's got to do their own thing. And he kind of learned that, because he did his own thing and got a lot of blowback. So he doesn't want to be the guy giving blowback. But the more interesting one was Isaiah. That was the one that really, they both committed, and Isaiah decommits. And I asked him about it. What does that mean for you? He goes, oh, well, he's got to do his own thing. But 5 minutes later, he too was decommitted. Now Isaiah's committed to Georgia. In other words, this isn't going to hurt Georgia's chances. And I think that the pressure, if you get Elijah Griffin today, the pressure only increases on Justice Terry to come be a part of something special, because they're showing him. Trey Scott has been in his ear for a long time. They literally started recruiting Elijah, I think, before he got to high school, didn't he?
Yeah, it was 8th grade. They offered him in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing. Georgia's losing a ton of defensive linemen. I mean, whether it's to NFL, retirement, loss of 6-year seniors, I don't know. They're losing a ton of guys. I mean, you look down the board and you got Rochester, you got Brinson, you got Ingram Dawkins. You know, I don't know what Christian Miller's draft stock's like, but you know he's a guy that's up there, and you just got all kind. Michael Williams. I mean, you go down the board, you're losing a ton of guys, and you have a lot of opportunity to come in and play early because you got guys that the younger classmen, Jamal Jarrett, Jordan Hall. Jordan Hall's been injured, hadn't really, there's not a lot of separation of true playing time for those guys over these freshmen that are coming in. And yeah, they're familiar with the system, but there's going to be a lot of playing time available, come next year, and you're going to see a lot younger defense, more so in the trenches than necessarily the like the secondary. I think you got some cornerbacks coming back. You got Dan Jackson can't come back, but you have some.
Nazir Stackhouse got to be gone.
Yeah, you'll have KJ Bolden coming back, and you'll have your 2 inside linebackers coming back. But I think the defensive line is where you're going to be really young, and that's sometimes a bad thing. But these guys are talented. I mean, these are guys that can come in and make an impact, and they'll be more talented than this line last year. Just be less, of course, less leadership and less. Those guys have been there on Stackhouse, and those guys have been playing for a long time at the University of Georgia. So
yeah, and some of those guys that have been at Georgia, in their years 4 and 5 and feels like 6, they were beat out by better players. They're your starters now because of attrition. They didn't come in and win a job as a freshman or a sophomore.
So most of these guys are backups to those Devontae Wyatts and all those guys that are in the league now. So I mean, I feel like Ingram Dawkins has been there forever, and he's backed up Trayvon Walker. He's backed up Michael Williams. He backed them all up. So,
well, it's kind of the same on the offensive line. You got Xavier Truss up there. I mean, Broderick Jones had his spot. Amarius Mims had his spot.
They shifted him inside, but he was still the 3rd offensive guard for some time, and it's been.
I mean, I'm not banging on him. I think he's good. I'm just saying there's some of the guys you have who are kind of long in tooth are good because they've been in the system a long time. But some of they'll win you ball games, but they're not difference makers.
Yep,
they're winners, absolute winners. They're going to go into Texas tomorrow and probably come out with a win. I might put that in my column later this afternoon. Georgia wins it based on the fact that they've been in these battles before. I don't know that Texas has. I trust these guys in those big situations. It's not going to be – they're not going to have wide eyes and stuff like that. But you bring in an Elijah Griffin, this kid's different. Justice Terry's different. You saw Justice Terry at that Rhinos camp throwing people. I mean, that Under Armour camp, just throwing people around. I'm like, dude, it's just a camp. Don't hurt anybody. Watch these clips of Elijah. He is an absolute beast. And there's no bad fat on him. He flies to the ball. They're both smart. Isaiah Gibson's a badass. This is a different class.
Yeah, it's funny watching Justice Terry at these camps because they'll say we need a defensive end, he'll hop in. We need a defensive tackle, or we need somebody to play over the center, he'll hop in. I mean, he will hop in these reps and he will beat everybody's ass. I mean, it's just that's basically what I mean. He just dominated. I remember going to watch him at IMG when he was going into a junior. I rode on a plane with him. I was right next to him on the mud. Me and him were sitting on a plane. Sit next to a 320 or whatever pound defensive lineman on a plane. It's not the most comfortable ride. But
were you side by side?
Oh, side by side.
Who got the armrest?
Oh, he had the window seat. I was in the middle.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're in the middle, you're supposed to get both armrests.
I should, but that's not. That wasn't the case.
Coward.
But he is he's just what I love about Justice, and I haven't seen Elijah as much as I've seen Justice, but just the way he is in camp, he's a go getter. He just fits into the way Georgia likes to play. So I mean, to a T.
Elijah Griffin just committed to the University of Georgia. Give me a second to launch my tweets here. Come on now.
That's just a there we go. Huge pickup right there. It's
That's fucking huge. Excuse my language. That's big. Georgia needed that. It's the start of a good weekend. Bulldogs pick up 5-star Elijah Griffin. Set up very well to get 5-star Justice Terry. They already have Isaiah Gibson. This is the defensive line haul in this class could be something very, very special. This is a big freaking deal, folks.
there's the Kirby Smart tweet.
And we're going to have Jed on here in just a second to come kind of give his thoughts on it. But this is, and there's the Go Dogs from Kirby Smart. So now you know it's real because Kirby Smart has actually put out his Go Dog. So let me.
And this is watching his film. This is what I see about him. I've said Justice Terry can line up all over the defense line, but you see most of Griffin's films at defensive end, even though he's, the 290 pounds, 295, most of his film is with him repping at defensive end. So you can play him at, variety of places. He could play the 5, he could play the 3, you can slide him in on nickel. You can just, those are 2 defensive linemen, similar to the way you can use Devontae Wyatt, that you can just move him all over the field. The way they use Trayvon Walker, stand him up, move him inside on nickel, play him at defensive end. There's just so much you can do with elite defensive linemen, and that's what Georgia's been missing.
Everybody's talking about this game coming up against Texas tomorrow. I spoke to people inside the building at UGA, and I'm like, hey, well, one of the more interesting things was I was wanting to get coaching philosophy from some of these folks. I'm like, okay, you guys, we'll talk about, hey, put in this guy, put in that guy. Kirby, Mike Bobo, call this. Glenn Schumann, call that. Get out of zone. Stop doing press man. We all have all these advice for the coaches. We all tell them who to play and who not to play, what schemes to call, what schemes not to call. And I actually asked them, what is easier, changing the players or changing the scheme? They said, well, it's easier changing players, but just because you're bringing a new player doesn't mean he's going to be. I mean, if he was better than the guy that's doing it right now, he'd be the starter. And like, okay, well, I mean, I get that makes sense in theory, but sometimes a new guy comes in and he plays better under the lights, or he plays better that day. And he said, yeah. I said, so you see why I'm asking? I want to know about the secondary. You had 3 guys out of your 5 go to the NFL. You got torched by Mississippi State, freshman QB. This guy was just lighting you up. You had so many busts. You got torched by Alabama. You got to be worried about Georgia secondary. And he said, well, the problem with the secondary is not that we don't have the right players or we need to play somebody else. And, I'm sure they'll play Ellis Robinson more. But he said, we're not affecting them up front. Our defensive line, our front 7 has to take care of the back end. And I'm like, yeah. And aside from Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and I think Christian Miller is a great player, but you don't have an elite guy.
Yep.
We thought Jordan Hall might be that guy. He hasn't even played this year. Michael Williams played 11 snaps last week. Jalen Walker has to play inside and outside. So you've got a couple of elite guys, but one of them's been banged up. I'm just saying, in reference, getting this guy in changes everything.
And I think a big deal. I mean, you even see Georgia blitzing, and when those blitzers can't get free, that means the defensive linemen are not eating up, what they're supposed to. Because when an offensive lineman can block their guy and get a hand on another guy, that means the defensive lineman is not necessarily doing their job. So I think that just the production up front, it hasn't looked bad from a statistical standpoint because Georgia's brought extra guys to stop the run. Georgia's done what they need to do, and it's made the pass defense look, a lot worse than it should be. But I think, defensive line hasn't, it is not elite like it used to be, where you could win with 4, or you could win with bringing that extra guy or sending that loop blitz like they do with the middle linebacker and him coming free. They just haven't come free because the defense lineman's not, necessarily dominating.
To be fair, you bring up that how many times does Schumann love to run that A-gap blitz? And like you said, he's just not getting there because somebody's getting a hand on him because, guard centers not having to double team somebody because you got such a monster, with that 3-eye technique or something like that. I get it. But I do want to point out that numerous times they have collapsed the pocket on some of these quarterbacks. They were on Jalen Milroe. They were on that Mississippi State kid. They did Vandergrift, Brock collapsed on him, and they pop out. They spring free, and you're like, now you don't have contain because you collapse the pocket. You got 4 or 5 Georgia defensive linemen surrounding a guy, and all of a sudden he shoots out, and you're like, son of runs for
and I think, and I've seen that a lot around college football, and I've seen a lot with Georgia. And can you tell me when the last time Georgia had a targeting call? I can't recall, but I think a lot of this has to do with the rules around the quarterback these days.
They've had a bunch of roughing the passer ones that have made them very standoffish.
Yeah, but I think a lot of quarterbacks bounce out. I think that comes from defensive linemen just scared to tackle a quarterback these days. I mean, instead of going in, and that's no excuse for Georgia's missed tackles necessarily, but because sometimes they just get out athleted like they did with Milroe. Milroe just was able to get loose, but sometimes I believe that they kind of back off before they hit a quarterback because of the rules these days. I mean,
that's very fair. I mean,
ever since Jalen Walker hit the quarterback, Georgia's been scared to hit him.
That's going to cost you. Let's bring on Jed May, get Jed's thoughts here real quick. I like the comment from Eddie. 2 more rings incoming. Jed, put this in perspective. We've been singing Elijah Griffin's praises all day. Again, I'm more excited about this than – I'm going to say more excited than the game this weekend. It's a big game, but the one thing that I've missed about this Georgia team is just a defensive line. It's like, they can't run, so you're going to get pressure with 4 or maybe 3, and it just teams bang their head against the Georgia defense because they don't know what to do. I don't feel like that's the problem with Georgia right now. I mean, hell, even Kirby, when they were down 28-0 to Alabama, when he came off the field, he wasn't mad about his offense. He was mad about his defense not getting a stop. And I get he's a defensive coach, but he talks about the defense more than anything. And I just feel like this is a huge step to getting back to where, Eddie's comments of 2 more rings incoming.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of these game record types, and we talked about him. Justice Terry, as I'm sure y'all have mentioned him. He is another one of those guys that it's tackles for loss. I think I mentioned this. I don't know what I mentioned this on, but the guys that can turn a 1st and 10 into like a 2nd and 12 versus a 2nd and 7, like that changes things for an opposing offense. And I think Elijah's that guy. He's going to be that 3 tech. He could maybe occasionally kick inside a little bit depending on packages and whatever, but he's mainly going to be that 3 tech. And I think he's a guy who could play early. And when I talked to him the other night, Tuesday, I think, he was like, I want to go to Georgia. I want to be an academic All-American, and I want to be a freshman All-American in my first year in Athens. So he's got high goals for himself, and he's a guy that can live up to it for sure.
So basically, you've known about this for a long time.
Yeah. Well, so I've known about it. I saw him in May, and I remember I asked him, something about along the lines of what school is going to end up getting your commitment or what's going to be the deciding factors or whatever. And he's like, well, relationships and development and, a lot of things that sound like Georgia. And after the interview, I was like, hey man, that kind of sounds like Georgia's in a good spot, right? And he's like, yeah, honestly, I've been committed for a few months now. So this whole thing has been he is known, and he's taken he's treated this like you should. You know where you want to go, and you take some other visits to be sure. He visited Miami. He visited USC. Not sure if he's visited Clemson this year or not. Clemson was in it for a while, and no one was able to sway him off that Georgia pitch. It was funny. He told me when the coaches visited him in January, he had a speech written on his phone that he read off to him, to Kirby Smart, Trey Scott, those guys. So yeah, it's been, again, he's known for a while, and he made sure he knew. He did his due diligence, but no one got him off the Georgia train once he was on it.
Okay, so he's been a silent commit for a while. You sit on that, which as a good reporter should. If told you in confidence, you don't share it. I feel like Trent's known it for a year. We were joking. He put in his future cast pick for Elijah Griffin last November. So we're almost a year into it. Ben Bachman did it last May, not 2024, but 2023. So some of our guys have known this was coming a long time, but everyone's expected it. But there were some things in Savannah that kind of changed up, which made us kind of double check because there are a lot of people pushing him towards Georgia, but then there's machinations that happen with every commitment or every recruitment before the commitment. And even there's questions about how long does this commitment stick? And I'm like, to me, I feel like this commitment sticks. If you write a speech for Kirby Smart and you've been committed this long, that does not mean that other schools will not come in and try to change his mind.
Well, heck, he had Jason Taylor at his school the other day that spent all day in Savannah, and that's a pretty big name to try to come get you to persuade you to come down to the U. But there was no persuading this decision, because I think this decision has been made with him and his family for months, like Jed said.
Well, and when I talked to him the other day, he said Mom has always wanted him to go to Georgia. That's where Mom, fell in love with from the beginning. Georgia was his first offer a little over 4 years ago, and Mom has loved it ever since. So he and his mom are very tight. And she was a big factor in the decision. She's been to Georgia a bunch of times, and I think she's only been she went to South Carolina once maybe, and she went to USC. She's been in Georgia way more than anybody else. And his grandmother's been, his sisters have been. It's been a family affair in Athens for a long time, just bringing different members of his family to experience it. I remember in January when I talked to him, he visited for junior day. He's like, yeah, I brought my grandma. This was the first time she has been here, and I want her to experience what I experienced. So again, it's been it's simultaneously it's been going this way for a long time, but also it's been a very well research decision. If he went to USC and fell in love with it's Eric Henderson and all that stuff, which we've seen USC do that. We've seen them get these guys from Georgia out there and at least get commitments that last for a little bit anyway. But he didn't do that. He stayed. I don't say stay true to his Georgia commitment because he obviously wasn't committed, but he didn't make any rash decisions. And I think, and to that point, he could have gone public with it in January if he'd wanted to. But instead he said, this is where I want to go. I'm pretty sure, but I'm going to, ride this out, make doubly sure. And now that he's committed in October, I think this is it. I don't see him taking any more visits other than Georgia. And it's a deal now, but this is a recruitment that Georgia needed really bad. Again, you talked about mid-year? When I first got on, Georgia needs these guys on the defensive line. And when you've got this type of guy in the state, in a Georgia heavy area, a guy that has loved Georgia you can't lose this one. And they didn't. Credit to Trey Scott and all the defensive line staff for getting him on board.
I love going to Savannah, speaking to the Bulldog clubs down there. They're the best. Same in the Kingsland area. They're awesome.
Got any upside down cow signs?
Upside down cow signs?
Old D-Rob.
Oh. I like it. Is he a mid-year enrollee?
Yep. I thought he was, but he mentioned that the other day. He'll be there in January.
All right. So immediate impact. The reason I say that, getting him in and getting I don't say the conditioning, but learning the system in spring is huge. It's tough to come in and play as a true freshman. I know he wants to be freshman All-American. It's incredibly hard to play defensive line as a freshman, as we've seen. I mean, they haven't played a ton of them. I get that. It's a tall order there. But having him, if you can get Justice Terry in as a mid-year, Isaiah Gibson in his mid-year, again. And I know they got others. I guess who's the zero technique? Darren?
They don't really have. Stephon Shivers was that guy. I think of the flip targets, I think Braxton Kyle is probably the closest to that. Kevin Wynn maybe could be.
There's a lot of people in the comment section. Don't forget about Kevin Wynn, and we haven't. Trust me.
Well, his friend of mine just sent me this tweet from the coach at Greene County. Read the tea leaves. No need for the 4 defensive tackles from the same state. So might be a a little. And then USC just flipped Kevin Wynn's teammate Stephen Miller from, I think he was committed to Mississippi State. So it could be trending toward USC. But again, I mean, you've got Griffin, you've got JJ Haney from California, who's having a good senior year, only his, I believe, second year playing football.
You need to watch Florida commit Jeremiah McLeod.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys, you know, and even if you set aside a spot reserved for Justice Terry, there's probably Trent, 2 spots left maybe outside of Justice. So between McLeod, Joseph Mbachu, Grayson, Josiah Victor, Braxton Kyle, Kevin Wynn, there's a lot of names out there who could fill a couple of these spots. And again, if Justice Terry wants in, Justice Terry's getting in the class.
Yeah, he's in.
It's
let's hear from Elijah Griffin.
Go Dog Nation, baby. Sick one. That's all I can say. Sick one. Go Dog Nation, baby. Sick one. That's all I can say. Sick one.
Look at that, dude. Look at the traps of that kid.
That's unreal. That's a future first round defensive lineman.
He was telling me the other day
next year.
When one of the games I went to this year, he has September 15th, 2020 tattooed on his arm, and that's the date that Georgia offered him, and it's also his godmother passed away the same day, and he's like, man, it's crazy. I don't know if it's God's plan or what.
So he got a tattoo of the offer date and his
godmother that passed away. And then when I talked to him the other day, he said, yeah, you know, my mom's first car, you know, had a Georgia sticker on it, and she didn't even, you know how that would be. And I was like, dude, did you feel like this whole thing, like it's been pointing toward Georgia the whole time? He's like, yeah, man, I'd see signs. I'd see, you know, Go Dog signs on the road or Sick'em signs on the road. It just, I don't know, maybe it was all God's plan. So, but that made me think of him saying that. It's just, again, this has been one that has been pointing toward Georgia for so long. And it's one that you can't let this kid leave the state. He's a Georgia type.
The number of 5 stars that have left the state that have come back to bite you in the ass is phenomenal.
I would say Derek Brown as a player, not a recruitment.
Yeah, he's not.
I don't think he's the other one.
There's only one of them. Jordan Davis, he's not that big. Clowney's not that fast. Derek Brown's got probably the greatest motor I've ever seen on a defensive lineman. I know he went to Auburn, but I covered a nothing game, him against Cedar Shoals, and I ran out of room on my data card for the number of plays he made. It was nuts. Guy made tackles on the far side of the field, just ran like a soccer player, nonstop. So I would think, yeah, Derek Brown is a great example there. But I like the other question, though, was what's the difference between Elijah and Justice Terry? You're going to get those guys. And again, I think you're getting Justice Terry. It ain't going to be easy. You know, he's already decommitted once. He could go somewhere else, but I think I like Georgia's chances there. Trent, what's the difference between the two of them?
Well, I think Griffin's a little longer. You know, he's 6'6". Justice is probably 6'4", 6'3", maybe 6'4". I don't think he's taller than that, but
he's 6'6".
As a player, it's hard to tell. I just think, like I said, I haven't seen Elijah enough to know. You know, I haven't seen him play live, and Jed would know more than I. But just from a Justice Terry standpoint, I just love Justice Terry's athleticism. The way you can move him in all 3 positions on the line. I mean, he could play any of the 3, and just having them 2 together. Ultimately, I think they're both 3 techniques, but I think you can move them around to where you play them at the same time constantly. I think one can play 3, one can play 5, one can play 3, and one can slide into playing over the center. So I think you can play them a little bit everywhere, and it would not surprise me to see more like a 2-eye, 4-eye type of scheme, letting them play both of them on the interior. But they're just both elite defensive linemen. What Georgia's really been missing on the past couple of years.
Jed, I was going to say the same thing. I'm like, you can't say, oh, well, this guy's a 5 and that's a 3. They're the body shapes. They both lined up at 3s. Okay. Both lined 5-eye. Okay. I mean, Neither one's got bad fat on them. They both.
Mhm.
No, and I wouldn't label any of them as if you had a depth chart. I don't elite defensive lineman. No, I mean
Yeah.
it's not
Four.
really.
Kirby Smart's 4 on the depth chart.
I mean, you put them two, and Isaiah Gibson together, and just say elite. That's all you need, elite.
Honestly, I've seen those guys. Hey, watch the film of them. These guys have also lined up out there like a 7 coming off the edge, and nobody can stop them.
Well,
they're not outside linebackers. Don't get me wrong; they're not DNs, but
you can afford to do that.
Yeah.
With Isaiah Gibson, with those two guys on the inside.
Mhm.
You can't afford to do that in Georgia's scheme right now. You can't widen them out because you need help in the interior. But with those two guys on the inside, you can do a lot of different things.
Yeah, I mean, when we look back at this class, I mean, you've got Griffin, you've got Gibson. If you get Terry, I mean, that's Griffin and Terry are already 5 stars. I think there's a pretty good shot Gibson ends up a 5-star. JJ Haney's a guy who I think has got, like, he gets forgotten because he kind of committed out of nowhere and he's from California or from Germany, but plays in California. I think he's a guy that's got a really, really, really high upside too. So you got those. And then if you hit on any of these other, this mosh pit of guys who could end up in the class, I mean, this is a generational defensive line class. I mean, you want to throw that word out there?
That's why I'm excited. That's why I dropped an F-bomb accidentally.
It's a 2-ring. It's a future 2-ring class.
Yeah,
I mean, back to again destroying people up front. I mean, this is what you do. And I mean, I know Trey Scott has won, Recruiter of the Year, I think a couple times.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be quite honest, I think this class is better. If this class could be better, if all goes according to plan, this could be the best class.
If he lands those top 3, this is the best class ever.
Yeah, I mean, and now granted, you got to credit Chidera Uzo-Gribe a lot for landing Gibson as well, but still, I mean, if you talk about front, 5, not counting the inside linebackers of defensive front, this class, I mean, because Darren Nickanagbin's another guy, kind of like Haney, who I think he kind of gets forgotten about, but he's got loads and loads and loads of potential, and he's a guy that Georgia really, really liked and prioritized over some other guys in this cycle. So, yeah, man, it already is ridiculous, and there's so much more, meat on the bone, I guess. With Justice and some of the other guys.
You still got Chase Linton out there, and you still got
good point.
Jeremiah McLeod out there, and you still, I mean, there's guys out there that you could make this, and I know they're not the elite guys, and they'll probably be forgotten guys in this class with what they have at the top, but these are guys that you could see, just making this defensive line or front 5 guys push it over the top.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you there. We were thinking about, what is the comparison? And I thought, you remember Jalen Carter just grabbing up Jaden Daniels and just holding him in the air like a child, against LSU. I remember a clip of Devontae Wyatt getting a sack basically out of that 7 technique, just came. What is he doing? Is he lost? Oh, sack. Jordan Davis. Remember, there's that thing of him basically taking on 3 offensive linemen. He lined up inside shade on the tackle. The guard came down, and there was like a 3-man rush. The center came over, and there's 3 of them, and he still made the quarterback throw the ball quick. I mean, there's clips of those guys affecting the play completely. And I thought that the last game with Tierman and Dawkins, he got in the backfield so fast the first series, he shut it down almost single-handedly. He's got that. Christian Miller's been able to do it some. But you're not able to point to those guys a lot in those biggest games. And, again, we're splitting hairs talking about who's better, who's best, who's elite. It's, again, those guys are winners. But are they first-round draft picks, second-round draft picks? If Elijah Griffin in our rankings, we expect him to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. We expect the same thing if they get Justice Terry. Maybe Isaiah Gibson gets up there. But the point of when we say 5-star, it's not just an accolade that we hand out. Like, you're a really great high school football player. There's 3 million high school football players. We basically give 5-star rankings to 32 of them. So it doesn't mean that one year there's only going to be 10 5-stars, and next year there'll be 70 5-stars because there's all these good players. A 5-star rankings from rivals.com means we expect you, after everything is said and done, to be a first-round draft pick. So Georgia picked up one today. We expect him to be a first-round draft pick to affect the game, be all SEC, all American. And I think they're in a great position to pick up Justice Terry. He's not far from here. I can go by and see him. He's not playing a whole lot. He's kind of banged up, but you guys talk about how good this class could be. And what's the difference for Texas? They fix their offensive and defensive lines. You know, that was what they did at Michigan. They got better up there. That's why they won a national title. They were better in the trenches. You build from the inside out. Kirby Smart said that in day one. And they signed a ton of offensive linemen last year. Some good guys. They've got a bunch of them this year, and they're getting back to it. And of course, a lot of people are saying, "Well, why can't you sign a 5-star wide receiver?" I'm like, 5-star wide receivers, I don't say you can find them anywhere. They're hard. They're very hard to find, but you can find receivers. Georgia's been doing wonders in the transfer portal with receivers, but getting a kid like this, there's not a lot of. What do we have him size and weight? Excuse me. What is he? 6'6", 290? 280, 285, 6'6", 285. There's a rare human being that can move like that. So this, to me, I'll get more excited about this than I will any skill player.
Yeah, I mean, there's all the potential there for sure. And just to kind of, I got to head out. But as we look toward the future, the number one player in the 27 class is also at Savannah Christian, is very close with Elijah Griffin, LaDainian Guyton, an outside linebacker who is an absolute freak show. And it's not going to hurt Georgia to have Elijah in his ear for the next couple of years as well. So with that, I'm out.
Yeah, we're going to wrap there. Sorry, my mic was some crap.
Was that Bobo? Was that Bobo commenting?
Yeah.
On the plane? On the plane to Texas?
I love it. All right, folks, we're going to wrap up here. Jed's on his way to the airport, and we will be relying on him to give us a lot of updates from Texas. So let's let him get on the way. We appreciate all of you joining us. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.